The hum of the space station's engines was a constant companion to Jax, the kind of background noise that faded into the rhythm of life. It was a sound he'd grown accustomed to over the years, much like the faint tang of recycled air and the occasional shudder of the station's aging infrastructure. Jax was a mechanic, one of the best on this side of the galaxy, though he'd never admit it. His workshop was a cluttered haven of tools, spare parts, and half-finished projects, each one a testament to his skill and his unrelenting curiosity. He had a knack for fixing things others deemed beyond repair, a talent that had earned him a reputation, and a steady stream of work on the remote outpost of Gamma 9. Gamma 9 wasn't much to look at, a hulking mass of metal and wires orbiting a dying star. It was a place where people came to disappear, to work in obscurity, or to escape something they'd rather forget. Jax fell into the latter category, though he rarely spoke of it. His past was a shadow he carried with him, one that had shaped him into the solitary, driven man he was today. He didn't mind the isolation. In fact, he preferred it. Machines were predictable, reliable. They didn't ask questions or make demands. They simply were, and Jax found a strange comfort in that. The day began like any other. Jax was elbow-deep in the guts of a malfunctioning cargo loader, his hands moving with practiced precision as he traced the faulty wiring. The loader was a relic, a piece of junk that should have been scrapped years ago, but Jax had a soft spot for lost causes. He was just about to solder a connection when the station's comm system crackled to life. "Jax, you there?" The voice belonged to Kira, the station's operations manager and the closest thing Jax had to a friend. She was sharp, efficient, and had a dry sense of humor that Jax appreciated, even if he rarely showed it. "Yeah, I'm here," Jax replied, not looking up from his work. "What's the problem this time?" "We've got a distress signal," Kira said, her tone serious. "Weak, but it's definitely there. Coordinates are coming through now." Jax paused, his brow furrowing. Distress signals weren't uncommon in this part of space, but they were usually false alarms, malfunctioning beacons or pranks pulled by bored pilots. Still, protocol demanded they check it out. "You want me to take a look?" "You're the only one available," Kira said. "And let's be honest, you're the only one who can handle it if it turns out to be something serious." Jack sighed, setting down his tools. "Fine. Send me the coordinates. I'll take the shuttle." The shuttle was a small, nimble craft, one of the few things on Gamma 9 that Jax had personally upgraded. It wasn't much to look at, but it was fast, reliable, and packed with enough tools to handle most emergencies. Jax suited up, his movements automatic as he checked the shuttle systems and prepped for launch. The coordinates Kira had sent led to a sector of space that was largely uncharted, a fact that didn't sit well with him. But he pushed the unease aside, focusing on the task at hand. The journey was uneventful, the shuttle's engines humming softly as it cut through the void. Jax kept his eyes on the sensors, watching for any signs of the source of the distress signal. It didn't take long to find it. A derelict ship, drifting aimlessly in the darkness. It was an alien design, one Jax didn't recognize, its hull scarred and pitted from years of neglect. The ship was massive, easily twice the size of Gamma 9, and it loomed ominously as Jax brought the shuttle in for a closer look. "This doesn't look good," Jax muttered to himself, his fingers flying over the controls as he scanned the ship for signs of life. The readings were faint, but there was definitely something or someone still alive on board. He hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks. Boarding an unknown ship was always a gamble, but he couldn't just leave without at least trying to help. With a deep breath, Jax maneuvered the shuttle into position, docking with the derelict ship's airlock. The process was slow, the ancient mechanisms groaning in protest as they struggled to connect. When the airlock finally sealed, Jax grabbed his toolkit and stepped inside, his helmet's headlamp cutting through the oppressive darkness. The interior of the ship was a maze of twisted metal and shattered glass, the remnants of a violent struggle. Jax moved cautiously, his boots crunching on debris as he made his way deeper into the ship. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were scorched in places, as if they'd been hit by some kind of energy weapon. He found himself wondering what could have caused such damage, and what kind of creature could have survived it. It wasn't long before he found the source of the distress signal. The room was large, its walls lined with strange, alien machinery that hummed faintly with residual power. In the center of the room, chained to the floor, was a creature unlike anything Jax had ever seen. It was massive, its scales glinting in the dim light, and its wings, though tattered and torn, were folded tightly against its body. Its eyes, glowing with an otherworldly light, locked onto Jax as he entered the room. For a moment, Jax froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature was a dragon, or at least something close to it. Its body was serpentine, its head crowned with horns, and its tail coiled around a smaller, trembling form. A hatchling. The dragon's gaze was intense, but there was no malice in it. Only pain and a desperate plea for help. Jax took a cautious step forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "I'm here to help." The dragon didn't respond, at least not in words. Instead, Jax felt a strange pressure in his mind, a sensation that was both alien and familiar. It was as if the dragon was trying to communicate with him, to convey its thoughts and emotions directly. The message was fragmented, but the meaning was clear. "Help us." Jax hesitated, his mind racing. This was beyond anything he'd ever dealt with, beyond anything he'd ever imagined. But as he looked into the dragon's eyes, he saw something that resonated deep within him, a reflection of his own loneliness, his own longing for connection. He couldn't turn away. Not now. The chains were thick and heavy, their links forged from a metal Jax didn't recognize. It took all his skill and strength to break them, but eventually, the dragon was free. It rose unsteadily to its feet, its massive form towering over Jax. The hatchling clung to its side, its eyes wide with fear and curiosity. As the shuttle's engines roared to life, Jax glanced at the dragon, its massive form filling the small cabin. He had no idea what he was getting himself into, no idea what kind of trouble he just invited into his life. But as the shuttle pulled away from the derelict ship, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The journey back to Gamma 9 was quiet, the dragon and its hatchling resting in the shuttle's cargo hold. Jax kept his eyes on the controls, his mind racing with questions. Who had chained the dragon? Why had it been abandoned? And what kind of consequences would he face for bringing it back to the station? He didn't have answers, not yet. But as he guided the shuttle through the void, he knew one thing for certain. His life was about to change in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. And for the first time in a long time, he was ready to face whatever came next. The shuttle's docking clamps hissed as they locked into place, and Jax exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The journey back to Gamma 9 had been tense, the weight of his decision pressing down on him like a gravity well. He glanced over his shoulder at the cargo hold, where the dragon and her hatchling lay curled together, their scales shimmering faintly in the dim light. The dragon's eyes were closed, her massive chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. But Jax could feel her presence like a low hum in the back of his mind. It was unsettling, yet oddly comforting. A reminder that he wasn't alone in this. The station's airlock cycled open with a groan, and Jax stepped out, his boots clanging against the metal floor. He was met almost immediately by Kira, her arms crossed and her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Well?" she asked, her voice sharp. "What did you find out there?" Jax hesitated, glancing back at the shuttle. "It's complicated." Kira raised an eyebrow. "Complicated how?" Before Jax could answer, a low, resonant growl echoed from the shuttle, and Kira's eyes widened as the dragon emerged, her massive form filling the narrow corridor. The hatchling clung to her side, its wide eyes darting nervously between Jax and Kira. For a moment, no one moved, the air thick with tension. "Jax," Kira said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "What the hell is that?" "It's a long story," Jax replied, stepping between Kira and the dragon. "But she's not a threat. She was chained up on that ship, left to die. I couldn't just leave her there." Kira stared at him, her expression unreadable. Do you have any idea what you've just brought onto this station? That thing, whatever it is, could be dangerous. And what about the hatchling? Are we running a nursery now? Jax clenched his jaw, frustration bubbling up inside him. She's not a thing, Kira. She's sentient. And she's hurt. I'm not asking for much. Just a place for her to recover until I can figure out what to do next. Kira sighed, running a hand through her hair. You're lucky I like you, Jax. Because anyone else would have already called security. She glanced at the dragon, who was watching them with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of Jax's neck stand on end. Fine, but she stays in your workshop. And if anything goes wrong, this is on you. Jax nodded, relief flooding through him. Thank you, Kira. I mean it. Kira gave him a wry smile. Don't thank me yet. You've got your work cut out for you. The workshop was the only place on Gamma 9 large enough to accommodate the dragon, though it was still a tight fit. Jax cleared a space in the corner, stacking crates and moving equipment to make room. The dragon settled in with a low rumble, her eyes never leaving Jax as he worked. The hatchling, meanwhile, seemed fascinated by its new surroundings, sniffing at tools and poking its nose into every corner. Jax watched them for a moment, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. He hadn't expected to feel so protective. But there was something about the dragon's quiet strength and the hatchling's innocent curiosity that tugged at him, stirring emotions he'd long since buried. Over the next few days, Jax threw himself into caring for his unexpected guests. He used his knowledge of alien biology to treat the dragon's injuries, applying salves and bandages to her wounds. The hatchling, though skittish at first, quickly warmed up to him, following him around the workshop like a shadow. It was during one of these moments, as Jax was repairing a damaged circuit board, that the dragon spoke to him for the first time. Thank you. The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it echoed in Jax's mind with a clarity that left no doubt as to its origin. He froze, his hands hovering over the circuit board, and looked up at the dragon. Her eyes were fixed on him, glowing faintly in the dim light. You're welcome, Jax said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. Can you understand me? The dragon inclined her head, a gesture that felt oddly human. Yes. Your thoughts are clear to me, as mine are to you. Jax blinked, trying to process what he was hearing. So you've been listening this whole time? Not listening. Feeling. Your emotions are strong, Jax. Your loneliness, your pain, they resonate with me. Jax looked away, his throat tightening. He hadn't realized how transparent he was, how much of himself he'd been hiding. I didn't think anyone could see that, he admitted. The dragon's gaze softened. You are not as alone as you believe. You have saved us, and for that we are grateful. Jax swallowed hard, his chest aching with a mixture of relief and sorrow. I just did what I thought was right. And that is why you are different, the dragon replied. Why you are special. The hatchling chose that moment to climb into Jax's lap, its tiny claws digging into his legs as it settled down with a contented sigh. Jax chuckled, running a hand over its smooth scales. I think someone's getting spoiled, he said, his voice tinged with affection. The dragon watched them, her expression unreadable. You have given us hope, Jax. But I fear our presence here will bring danger to you. Jax frowned, his stomach twisting with unease. What do you mean? Those who chain me will not stop until they have reclaimed what they believe is theirs. They are relentless, and they will come for us. Jax's mind raced, his earlier sense of hope giving way to dread. Then we'll be ready, he said, his voice firm. I'm not letting anyone take you away. The dragon's eyes glowed brighter, a flicker of something like gratitude passing between them. You are brave, Jax, braver than you know. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Jax fortified the workshop, installing additional security measures and rigging up a makeshift alarm system. He also reached out to a few trusted contacts, discreetly gathering information about the alien species the dragon had described. What he learned only deepened his concern. They were ruthless, with a reputation for hunting down anyone who crossed them. Kira, for her part, kept her distance, though Jax could tell she was worried. She didn't ask questions, but her occasional glances at the workshop spoke volumes. Jax knew he was pushing his luck, but he couldn't bring himself to care. The dragon and her hatchling had become his responsibility, and he wasn't about to abandon them now. It was late one night, as Jax was tinkering with a new set of sensors, that the alarm went off. The shrill sound jolted him awake, and he scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding. The dragon was already alert, her head raised and her eyes glowing with a fierce intensity. "They are here," she said, her voice echoing in his mind. Jax grabbed a wrench, his hands trembling as he moved to the door. "Stay here," he said, his voice low. "I'll handle this." But the dragon shook her head, her massive form rising to its full height. "We face this together." The hatchling let out a soft whimper, its eyes wide with fear. Jax hesitated, then nodded. "All right, together." As the door slid open, revealing the shadowy figures of the alien hunters, Jax felt a surge of determination. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going down without a fight, and neither were they. The corridor outside Jax's workshop was dimly lit, the flickering overhead lights casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The alien hunters stood in silence, their forms obscured by cloaking devices that made them little more than shimmering outlines in the gloom. Jax tightened his grip on the wrench, his knuckles white, as he stepped forward, the dragon looming behind him like a living shadow. The hatchling clung to her side, its tiny body trembling but its eyes fierce with determination. "You don't belong here," Jax said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Leave now, and we won't have a problem." One of the hunters stepped forward, its cloak flickering as it deactivated, revealing a tall, angular figure with skin like polished obsidian. Its eyes glowed a cold, unfeeling blue, and when it spoke, its voice was a guttural rasp that sent a shiver down Jax's spine. "You have something that belongs to us, human. Hand it over, and we will spare your life." Jax shook his head, his jaw set. "They're not yours. They never were." The hunter's lips curled into a sneer, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. "Foolish creature. You think you can defy us? We are the Virak. We take what we want." Before Jax could respond, the dragon let out a low, rumbling growl that reverberated through the corridor. "You will not touch them." The hunter's eyes flicked to the dragon, its expression unreadable. "You are weak, beast. Broken. You cannot protect them." The dragon's eyes flared, her scales shimmering with an otherworldly light. "You underestimate me." The tension in the corridor was palpable, a coiled spring ready to snap. Jax took a step back, his mind racing. He knew they were outmatched. The Virak were armed to the teeth, and he had nothing but a wrench and a dragon who was still recovering from her injuries. But he couldn't back down. Not now. The hunter raised a hand, and the other Virak moved as one, their cloaks flickering as they advanced. Jax braced himself, his heart pounding in his chest. But before the first blow could be struck, the dragon surged forward, her massive body filling the corridor. She let out a roar that shook the walls, her wings spreading wide as she unleashed a torrent of flame. The Virak scattered, their cloaks flickering as they dodged the fiery onslaught. Jax didn't waste a second. He darted forward, swinging the wrench at the nearest hunter. The blow connected with a satisfying crunch, and the hunter staggered back, its cloak flickering as it struggled to maintain its form. Jax pressed the attack, his movements fueled by desperation and adrenaline. But he knew it wouldn't be enough. There were too many of them. The dragon fought with a ferocity that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Her claws tore through the Virak's armor like paper, and her flames lit up the corridor with an intense, blinding light. But even she couldn't hold them off forever. The Virak were relentless, their attacks precise and coordinated, and it wasn't long before the dragon began to falter, her movements slowing as her injuries took their toll. Jax saw the moment the tide turned. One of the hunters managed to land a blow on the dragon's flank, its weapon slicing through her scales and drawing a pained roar. The hatchling let out a shrill cry, darting forward to defend its mother, but it was quickly swatted aside by one of the hunters. Jax's heart clenched as he watched the tiny creature hit the wall and slump to the ground, unmoving. "No!" Jax shouted, his voice raw with anger and fear. He lunged at the nearest hunter, his wrench swinging wildly, but he was quickly overpowered, his weapon knocked from his hands. He hit the ground hard, the breath driven from his lungs, and for a moment he thought it was over. But then, something changed. The dragon let out a roar that was more than sound. It was a wave of energy that rippled through the corridor, knocking the Virak off their feet. Her eyes blazed with a light so intense it was almost blinding, and her scales shimmered with a power that seemed to come from deep within her. She rose to her full height, her wings spreading wide, and for a moment, she was more than just a dragon. She was a force of nature. "You will not harm them," she said, her voice echoing in Jax's mind with a power that made his bones vibrate. "You will not take what is mine." The Virak hesitated, their confidence faltering in the face of the dragon's newfound strength. But it was only for a moment. With a snarl, they regrouped, their weapons raised as they prepared to attack again. Jax scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. They couldn't keep this up. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. He needed a plan, something to turn the tide in their favor. And then, it hit him. "The shuttle!" he shouted, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. "We need to get to the shuttle." The dragon turned to him, her eyes glowing with understanding. "Go. I will hold them off." Jax shook his head. "No, we're doing this together." The dragon hesitated, then nodded. Together. They moved as one, the dragon's massive form clearing a path through the Virak as Jax darted forward to scoop up the hatchling. It was still breathing, but barely, and Jax's heart ached as he cradled it in his arms. "Hold on, little one," he whispered. "We're getting out of here." The shuttle was close, just a few corridors away, but it felt like miles. The Virak were relentless, their attacks growing more desperate as they realized what Jax was planning. But the dragon was unstoppable, her flames and claws cutting through their ranks with a ferocity that left Jax in awe. When they finally reached the shuttle, Jax didn't hesitate. He activated the launch sequence, his hands flying over the controls as the dragon stood guard at the entrance, her body blocking the Virak's path. The hatchling stirred in his arms, its eyes fluttering open, and Jax felt a surge of relief. "Almost there," he said, his voice tight with tension. "Just hold on." The shuttle's engines roared to life, the vibrations shaking the floor beneath their feet. The dragon turned to Jax, her eyes glowing with a fierce determination. Go. I will follow. Jax shook his head. "No, we're not leaving without you." The dragon hesitated, then nodded. "Then we go together." They boarded the shuttle just as the Virak broke through the dragon's defenses, their weapons firing as the shuttle's doors slammed shut. Jax didn't look back. He focused on the controls, his hands steady as he guided the shuttle away from the station and into the void. The Virak didn't follow. Whether it was because they couldn't or because they chose not to, Jax didn't know. And right now, he didn't care. All that mattered was that they were safe, for now. As the shuttle sped away from Gamma 9, Jax leaned back in his seat, his body trembling with exhaustion. The hatchling curled up in his lap, its tiny body warm against his, and the dragon settled in the cargo hold, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light. "What now?" Jax asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The dragon's voice echoed in his mind, calm and steady. Now we find a new home, a place where we can be free. Jax nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Sounds like a plan." As the shuttle disappeared into the vast expanse of space, Jax felt a sea of peace settle over him. The road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a purpose. And for now, that was enough.